Picture this. London, 1348. The Black Death has arrived, and it is systematically erasing the population of Europe. People are dropping in the streets by the thousands. The rich are terrified. Noblemen are barricading themselves in country estates, burning expensive incense to purify the air, and wearing silk to keep the pestilence away. They have the best doctors, the cleanest rooms, and the finest food, and yet they are dying like flies. But down in the literal bowels of the city, something impossible is happening. The men who spend their entire lives knee-deep in human excrement, the Nightmen, the Gong Farmers, the cleaners of the great Cesspits, are walking through the plague like they're wearing invisible armor. By every law of logic, these should be the first men to rot. They are covered in filth, surrounded by rats, and breathing air so thick with methane it can knock a horse unconscious. But while the silk-clad lords are being thrown into mass graves, the men in the sewers are still showing up for work. How did the most disgusting job in human history become the ultimate shield against the greatest biological catastrophe the world has ever seen? The answer is a terrifying biological trade-off that will completely change how you view the concept of cleanliness. To understand how these men survived, you first have to understand the nightmare they lived in every single day. In the 14th century, sanitation wasn't just bad, it was non-existent. Most cities were built over ancient, crumbling wooden drains that were never meant to handle the waste of a surging population. Every time it rained, the streets became a river of human waste, animal carcasses, and industrial runoff. The men hired to fix this were the outcasts of society. They worked only at night, by law, so the respectable citizens wouldn't have to see them. They were the Nightmen. Their job was to descend into pits that hadn't been emptied in a decade. Let's do the math on the danger. These pits weren't just smelly, they were chemical reactors. As human waste decomposes in an enclosed space without oxygen, it produces a cocktail of gases, ammonia, methane, and the silent killer hydrogen sulfide. This gas smells like rotten eggs at low levels, but at high concentrations, it paralyzes your sense of smell instantly. You think the smell is gone, you take a deep breath, and your lungs seize up. You drop dead in the muck before you even realize you're in danger. These workers lived in a state of permanent high-level toxic exposure. And if you want to make sure your own survival instincts are as sharp as a nightman's shovel, hit that subscribe button right now and launch a one-frame strike on the like button. Lock in your spot in the garrison before we reveal the brutal secret of their immunity. Because the gas wasn't the only thing they were fighting. Every cubic inch of the filth they shoveled was teeming with millions of bacteria. E. coli, salmonella, and the deadly organisms that cause dysentery and cholera. For a normal person, a single scratch in this environment meant a death sentence from sepsis within 48 hours. But these men were different. From the time they were children, they were exposed to a constant, non-stop barrage of low-level infections. Their immune systems didn't just function, they went into a state of permanent, aggressive mobilization. Their bodies were biological war zones, constantly producing a massive, hyperactive library of antibodies. By the time the Black Death arrived, the average sewer worker's immune system was so battle-hardened that it was operating on a level a nobleman couldn't even imagine. But it wasn't just the antibodies, it was the rats. The Black Death was carried by the Yersinia pestis bacterium, which lived in the guts of fleas. These fleas traveled on black rats. If you lived in a clean, noble manor, a single rat entering your bedroom was a catastrophic event. You had no protection. The flea would jump from the rat to your silk sheets, bite you, and you were dead in 5 days. But the sewer workers? They lived with the rats. They worked in the nests of the very creatures carrying the plague. And here is where the savage ingenuity of the human body takes a dark turn. Constant exposure to these rats meant these workers were being bitten by cleaner fleas parasites that didn't carry the plague but triggered a constant immune response. Recent studies in paleoepidemiology suggest a shocking theory. The sewer workers may have developed a localized resistance. Because they were constantly exposed to Yersinia pseudotuberculosis, a much milder ancestor of the plague found in soil and waste, their bodies had a ready-made template for the enemy. While the plague hit the upper classes like a lightning bolt to a dry tree, it hit the sewer workers like a spark to a wet log. It struggled to take hold. But there was a second, even more repulsive layer to their survival: the smell. In the 1300s, the dominant medical theory was miasma, the belief that diseases were caused by bad air or foul smells. To counter the plague, doctors told the rich to carry bouquets of flowers and sweet-smelling herbs. They stayed in perfumed rooms, avoiding anything that smelled like rot. This was their fatal mistake. By avoiding the bad air of the slums and the sewers, they also avoided the one thing that could have saved them: high concentrations of ammonia. The air in the cesspits and sewers was saturated with ammonia from decomposing urine. Ammonia is a powerful, natural antimicrobial agent. In high enough concentrations, it can actually decimate certain airborne pathogens, and more importantly, it acts as a massive deterrent for insects. Fleas, the primary delivery system of the Black Death, absolutely hate the smell of ammonia and sulfur. They thrive in the warm, sweet-smelling, carbon dioxide-rich environments of a clean bedroom or a crowded church. But the toxic ammonia-heavy stench radiating from a sewer worker's skin and clothes acted as a chemical cloaking device. To a plague-carrying flea, a Gong farmer didn't smell like food. He smelled like poison. The very thing that made these men social pariahs, the stench that made people cross the street to avoid them, was the invisible force field that kept the Black Death at bay. The rich died because they were clean enough to be attractive hosts. The poor survived because they were so saturated in filth that the plague's delivery system refused to touch them. But the luck of the Nightmen didn't last forever. History shows us that while they survived the Black Death, they were eventually wiped out by the very thing they helped build: the modern city. As cities grew larger and the sewers became more enclosed, the chemical balance shifted. The ammonia that once protected them was replaced by higher concentrations of explosive methane. The workers who had survived the greatest pandemic in history began dying in localized, violent gas explosions, or from great stink events that overwhelmed even their hardened immune systems. The story of the medieval sewer worker is the ultimate paradox of human history. It proves that survival isn't about comfort, or wealth, or even what we consider health today. It's about adaptation. It's about the brutal reality that sometimes the only way to beat a monster is to live in the dirt where the monster was born. These men were the literal foundations of civilization. They took the waste of empires on their shoulders, and in return, the filth gave them a terrifying, lonely immunity. They were the masters of the dark, the unkillable inhabitants of the underground, who watched the world above them crumble while they kept on shoveling. So the next time you see a clean historical movie where everyone has white teeth and perfect skin, remember the Nightmen. Remember that in the 14th century, the cleanest people were the first to die, and the men who smelled like death were the only ones who truly lived. If you want to make sure your knowledge of the darkest corners of history stays as sharp as a Gong Farmer's blade, don't let your subscription expire. Join the ranks, hit the like button, and stay prepared for the next time we dive into the savage ingenuity of the past.